Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lydia Connor and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. You can find me at Smiley Stomach on Instagram or you can visit smileystomach.com. But today I wanted to conclude my series of my dietetic internship videos with my clinical rotation video. Today I'll be answering some questions that were submitted on Instagram, so thank you to whoever submitted questions. Before we get started, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and if you'd like to hit the like button as well, I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave a comment or wait till the end to do so. I'd also encourage you to go back and see my food service video as well as my community video, and I hope you find each of those helpful. So without further ado, let's get started. The first question I got was, did you feel prepared? I honestly could not tell you that I felt prepared. I think that this one was the hardest one to feel confident for, just because I hadn't had any actual experience in clinical. I'd had food service experience and I'd had community experience as well in jobs that I had previously. But with dietetic students, it's really hard to find a place to gain clinical experience. So I definitely felt really nervous in that sense. Luckily, my program director as well as my preceptor provided me with some practice questions, things to look up as far as medical terminology and definitions like different surgeries, different disease states, things like that to familiarize myself with before starting. So I was able to spend my winter break kind of freshening up in some of those things. However, I still didn't feel prepared because I feel like there's just so many things that could happen. Kind of never really know what you're going to experience. Each patient is totally unique, and that's really super exciting and awesome, but it's also very intimidating too. So no, I did not feel prepared, but I think the longer that I was in the rotation, the more comfortable I became with that uncertainty. And the second question that I want to answer is, what did you bring with you to your rotation? So some things that I always made sure that I had were pencils, pens, my calculator, or I just used my phone calculator. But I also really liked this nutrition-focused physical exam pocket guide, and I thought it was really helpful and handy to have right with me at my desk when I was considering a patient's physical findings, as a whole chart with things that you would look at for diagnosing malnutrition. And so I would keep that handy, and I didn't really take it with me on the floor, although I know some people will keep this in like a lab coat pocket or something because it is nice and small and compact. So this was, I believe, about $15 from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and I definitely say it was very helpful. Other than that, I always had sticky notes and things to write notes on. I had notebook paper if I ran into any medical terminology or abbreviations that I wasn't familiar with, and I could write those down and look them up later or look them up right away depending on the situation. I also had access to a reference binder that I put together my senior year. I had a physical binder as well as a digital copy of some resources compiled, and that was really helpful to look things up when I wasn't familiar with certain diseases and the medical nutrition therapy that was recommended for those diseases. Comment down below if you have been a dietetic intern in a clinical rotation. What was something that you always carried with you? I'm curious if I missed out on anything that would have been super helpful, but also just so people who are watching this video getting ready to start will also have some other ideas on what they might need to bring with them for their rotation. Next question, advice about calculations. I think that calculations can be quite daunting. I'm someone who's a perfectionist, and I want to carefully complete my calculations to make sure that I get them all correct. When it came to tube feeding calculations, there's just so much to consider when you're trying to find the best formula, the best rate, if you need to add any protein modulars or anything else to make sure the patient is reaching their needs with calories and protein. It really is just a lot to consider. I was able to do some practice questions with the packet that I was working on over my winter break from my program director as well as my preceptor. So those were both really great things to have in my back pocket. But I also feel like I still was never totally prepared for those calculations, and when it's a real patient, it's a lot scarier than when it's just like a case study patient. So Definitely feel like practice is the most helpful when it comes to those calculations. Just taking those slow and steady, making sure you're getting everything punched into your calculator correctly and that you're considering everything that you need to. As with anything, if you're uncertain about a tube feeding calculation, it's best to double check with your preceptor, and they can provide you with some feedback as well as things you maybe forgot to consider, or some input from their perspective and their experience as to what you should do with it. If you still feel like you're struggling with your calculations, I would let your preceptor know or let your program director know, depending on how that relationship is. Do what you're comfortable with, but let them know that you're struggling, and I'm sure that they would be happy to provide you with some additional practice questions that you could do in the evenings. The next question is favorite and least favorite part. I would say that my favorite part of the dietetic clinical rotation was probably just working with the patients. I really enjoyed connecting with the patients, especially when they seemed really receptive to any of the nutrition education points that I was giving them. And sometimes certain patients just seemed so happy. It was surprising knowing they were in kind of uncertain circumstances, but they were kind of at peace with where they were. That was kind of reassuring to experience. But yeah, I really enjoyed the patients who were willing to make changes if necessary with their nutrition. As far as my least favorite part, I'd say something that really struck me was I'd be going into like a little old lady's room to check on her intakes, and she'd be convinced that I was going to tell her that she needed to stop eating something or, completely change her diet. She's probably like 85 years old. Weight loss is probably the last thing that she needs. Older women were underweight as far as I experienced, and so it was really upsetting to realize that so many people are conditioned to think that weight loss is the only logical answer to any of their problems. In reality, that could be the worst thing for them. That may never make sense to people. So it was really heartbreaking to see where those people were mentally and physically, and realizing too that some of them might have had like dementia or something hindering them from even retaining any information. Certain situations you do feel kind of helpless. Those are the hardest moments in clinical, and I think that's what I struggled with the most. Next, what was your hardest moment? I would say my hardest moment came probably right before my second evaluation. I think I was having a really tough day and feeling like the feedback that I was getting wasn't becoming any more positive. I felt like I was always doing something wrong, missing a detail, not retaining information fast enough or well enough. I think I really struggled with the medical terminology and understanding what certain surgeries were, certain diagnoses were. There's just a lot of information coming at you all at once, and I think that was really hard for me. And I also felt really discouraged by some people that I was looking up to for guidance in this rotation, and I felt really torn down. I wasn't getting very much encouragement, and there were some kind of unkind things said to me as well that really made me feel bad. In these moments, I just definitely had very low confidence, and it was really hard for me to come out of that feeling of inadequacy and having that imposter syndrome, and those moments really made me question if I was gonna be able to become a registered dietitian, because I think in my other positions I had felt so much more confident in like the food service and community rotations. So it was very disheartening to feel like for some reason, no matter how hard I worked, I just couldn't get it. I wasn't grasping it, and the feedback wasn't becoming any more positive. I ended up having to extend my clinical rotation by about a month because it just wasn't getting any better, and I wasn't really given any tangible feedback as to what I could do to make it better, and I was just so completely lost within myself as to what was missing. And At the time, I think I had a lot going on in my personal life as well that was really hindering me and my focus in this rotation. So definitely my mental health was struggling in both my professional and personal life. And so extending my clinical rotation was something that I hated that I had to do. I felt so defeated. I felt so, like I said, inadequate, and like I just wasn't really good enough. But at the end of it, I felt better for it, and I felt even more accomplished. It just was really hard to work through mentally at the time. As far as what I have learned from that situation, I definitely learned that there are going to be those hard days where things just don't make sense, and I'm still feeling some of that imposter syndrome even though I'm officially a dietitian. I know going forward, if I ever become a preceptor, I want to be encouraging. I want to be someone who provides very tangible feedback and gives advice that makes sense, and I never want to lower somebody's confidence. I want to give them the tools that they need to feel confident and lift them up and encourage them that they can be a registered dietitian. I hope if I'm ever a preceptor that I can be who I really needed at that time. The last question is, do you ever see yourself going into clinical dietetics? At this point, I don't think I'd be going into clinical dietetics. I actually did pretty much enjoy clinical dietetics. However, I feel like I thrive in the community setting, and so I'd love to see if I can land a position in that area first and foremost. There definitely are more jobs in the clinical realm, so it's been kind of hard to find things in the community setting for now, but I'm keeping my eye out. So I definitely don't want to close the door to clinical dietetics. I think, like I said, I did enjoy some parts of it, but not where I feel like my personality thrives. So maybe in the future when I have a little bit more experience under my belt, but not right now. That is all I have as far as questions. If you thought of any questions that I didn't answer along the way, make sure you put them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer those. I really hope that this was helpful, and if you haven't already, be sure to watch my food service and my community videos as well. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Smiley Stomach, and you can feel free to visit my website at smileystomach.com. I'll see you guys later. Bye.